Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Worth Your Time podcast. I'm your host, Ericka Andersen, and I'm excited today to have my guest, Rachel Marie Kang. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, I want to hear a little bit about who you are, but I will kick it off by just saying you are the founder, you're a writer, and you're the founder of Indelible Ink Writers, which is a writing community that I want to hear some more about. I know that you're writing a couple of books. And that you have a beautiful, beautiful Instagram account that's where I discovered you. And so it's been fun looking through some of that stuff today. But tell us a little bit more about who you are, where you live, and sort of what your story is.
Gosh, yeah, sure. Let's do this. I really love to introduce myself as a writer of poems, prose, and other pieces. I kind of stumbled upon that phrase about a year or two ago. And I think all my life I had kind of bounced around from, medium to medium. It started out journaling and then writing poems and then writing songs and being really passionate about essays in college, to then studying creative writing. And so kind of all my life, I've just done everything, and have enjoyed it, but have also felt like, do I need to peg myself in a hole? Do I need to just be one thing? And so I'd say the last couple of years I've had like a lot of fun and freedom just being able to say, I do dabble in all these different things. So yeah, really loving being on Instagram these days. Thank you for calling my account beautiful. It took me a while to land on it. And I was like, we're just going to go dark. We're just going to go very dark. Everything is dark. And so I'm glad you love it. I live in North Carolina, although I'm a New York native. And so I enjoy holding these two places very close to my heart as I write and learn more about the craft, and just try to dig my feet into, these people and places that make me who I am. Mm-hmm. I am a mother of two rambunctious boys. So yeah, I spend my days writing, working, and momming when I'm not juggling it well, all at the same time. So that's pretty fun.
That sounds a lot like my life.
It's pretty wild, right? It's really wild. But it's not impossible. And I love to say that too, and to speak into that, that it's not always going to be clean and clear. Mm-hmm. In fact, that's what a lot of what my first book is about is, you just, when you are trying to cultivate your creativity or trying to practice it, or, make some form, whatever form of creativity, a part of your life, that we often think that life will be perfect, or that the boundaries will fall in pleasant places. And that's not always true. And so, yes, this first book that's coming out, I won't announce the title just yet. We just landed on it not too long ago, but it really is all about how perhaps as we pursue our creativity, as we practice it, as we live to unleash it, that maybe that is the very thing that helps us bring light into these dark or hard areas of our life. So more to come on that very, very soon. We are working on the marketing phase of this book, and I'm so excited to just begin sharing more about it and go from that process of developing it and writing it in this kind of pigeonhole to soon sharing it. So yeah.
When does it come out?
So this book will release October of this year. My goodness, we're in 2022.
Isn't it such a long process, the book process, from going from like idea to getting a publisher to being published? You're like, oh my gosh, this is taking years of my life.
It is so long. And there's so many different phases. And I think there's so much room to be surprised by it too. Like I really enjoyed planning and plotting out my book more than I did writing it. And then of course I am an editor, and so I love editing, and so I've really enjoyed editing it more than I loved writing it. So just very surprising journey, I would say. And of course that means that I was writing through a pandemic, which is not ideal. But it did come with its own benefits, just kind of having that privilege of being tucked away was invaluable, really, and just kind of peering out to see, where is everybody and how are we and how can I speak into this? So
yeah, it's kind of, I mean, the pandemic kind of gave us a view, or just a different, or a perspective of things that we might never have seen before, like angles and sides of the world and people in our lives that wouldn't have ever been uncovered without, the forced quarantines and the lockdowns. And, I've noticed, I read this article recently, I can't remember, in the New York Times or something, where it was talking about a lot of women specifically not returning back to their prior jobs. And not just because of like needing to stay home with children, but because a lot of them sort of reevaluated what they wanted for their lives. And some of them decided they did want to stay home. And others were like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I in this job? Why am I not doing something I love? And so it's so interesting, what kind of art maybe will be brought out of this time, what we wouldn't have had without it,
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm so here to see it. And yeah, you're right. I mean, on the news stations, they're calling it, and maybe this is everywhere else, but they're calling it the Great Resignation. And I love that. I mean, I'm in that position too, where I'm reevaluating what matters to me. What are my values? What are the values that I'm unwilling to compromise on when it comes to work and family, and how I spend my time and my energy? Like, so much of creativity is energy, and so yeah, I so hear where you're coming from, and I'm anxious to hear the stories of the people that have left their jobs to pursue something completely and totally different, all for the sake of, like you said, it might not even be because of convenience of, or necessity, taking care of their kids, but there is some kind of fire burning in their heart that is telling them, like, this is the thing that you need to do, that you really want to do. Are you going to do it? I'm excited for the stories. I really am. I have one of my own.
It's kind of, there's not a lot of silver linings when it comes to COVID, not a lot, but one of them is that. And actually, I meant to say, what city in North Carolina do you live in?
I am just outside of Charlotte.
Okay, I was going to say, that reminds me, my sister actually just moved to Raleigh. And in part, the pandemic played a role in that, because her and her husband and their kids, they lived here in Indiana for their whole lives. And there was something about the pandemic that sort of made them go, if not now, when? And we've never done this. And like, now our kids are little enough to still, it's still kind of fine to move. So that's just one example of me seeing that in my life. So I loved one of your Instagram posts. I think it just said simply, art is prayer. And I thought that was so beautiful. And so I would love to ask you, how does your creativity and your writing and your art cross with your faith? Like, how are those two things, when you put them together, how do they influence one another, and how do they go together in your life?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I will first preface this answering this question by saying that I did not always think that my creativity and my art, cross paths with my faith. In fact, I always thought that maybe my creativity or my art was taking me away from what I believe, or what I was being taught to believe. And so I think that's just, I think a lot of people feel that way. I think there's a lot of people that are just desperate for permission to allow for their creative practices or outlets to be forms of worship. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could say about that, but I know for myself, a couple years back, I had been serving in church, and literally every role possible. And I just remember when I felt the urge, the desire within me to stop doing these other things and to instead pursue writing. And I felt it was a messy season. I felt wrong for thinking that. I felt like I was abandoning the more important work of, traditional ways maybe that people are serving, or maybe just roles that I felt like I had to step into. And so really I've been on this journey for 10 years now of like, how can I come to the page on the journal or show up on my Instagram account, or, actually not even Instagram, but like Canva or Adobe Illustrator, where I'm creating these things and, or, behind the lens of my camera. And how do I allow myself to know and believe that this is worship, that this strengthens my faith. It's not always clean cut. But I think that when I go back to the core of how these arts impact me, which is they mostly make me listen, they bring me to stillness, they bring me to quiet, to reflection and contemplation. And when I am in that place, I'm able to see and hear God more. And so, yeah, and I think that's what everybody wants, is to know something more. We're all seeking, we're always seeking. And so, yeah, I think, these creativities just play such a foundational piece in kind of quieting me and, that voice inside my head that thinks, everything, or you're always right. When I'm creating, I come to find that I don't know everything. And also I'm brought to such awe, like such fear and wonder of like, gosh, God, you are so big. You are so big. The other day I was at the lake near my house and the waves were just really loud. And I started crying because it was so beautiful and it was so loud to the point where it drowned out my own thoughts. And the thought that I had was, God, you're so distracting. Your glory is so distracting. And how can you not pay attention to God when you're in the midst of creation, and the sea and the wind and all those things. So yeah, I'm brought to contemplation, which I think gives way to worship.
Yeah, that just reminds me of something I was reading last night in the Bible, which was there's so many times in the Bible, especially I think in the prophet books, where it's like they're saying something, but then they stop and they're like, well, I can't remember exactly what it said. It was in Amos, and it was like, the God who turns the dusk to darkness and rushes the waters over the earth and treads on every high mountain. There's nowhere he's not been. And I think about that too every time I look at a sunset or a sunrise. I mean, every day I am in awe and wonder just by looking at the sunset. And I always tell my kids, do you see that? Like, God did that just for you. Like, he didn't have to give us that, but he gave that to us as a gift to see every day and remind us twice a day that he's there. And so, yeah, definitely nature and beauty are huge inspiration for me as well. And you talk about, the creative process, which is just like different for everybody. But you do have to get quiet and you do have to have that time, which is so hard at this phase in our lives as moms of little kids with jobs. I mean, sometimes it's like you really like you have this long to-do list, but when you want to write something of meaning, you need some time to do nothing. You need some time to think and just let your brain sort of move. So how do you create that space in your life?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're talking about this and I'm just thinking how it's funny. I have a kid he's about to turn 1, and we're just at that stage where you're like, okay, he wakes up at 6, so I'll wake up at 4. And then you like, as soon as you open your eyes in the bed, like the baby cries, it's like there's some kind of kinetic connection, and they just know like that you moved,
like,
and so they're
no.
awake. Yeah, it's like that twin connection, like and it makes me laugh, really. I'm like, this is so frustrating, but it's really totally comical. Like, how do you know when I wake up every morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always say, there are 2 things that I always say. First is, adaptability is such a great superpower. And the sooner that anyone can learn how to be adaptable and to quickly, change course or change your rhythm, the sooner you will, if that doesn't lead to you being able to create, at least it will lead to you having a little bit more peace and acceptance with where you're at. For certainly, like, it'll change your headspace. I am a morning riser. I like to rise before anyone wakes up. I like to rise and watch the sun rise, and I like to, that's just my time. But when you have a newborn or a child that is, teething or going through growth spurts, that early morning shift is not always guaranteed. And so I've had to adapt. Like, I work late into the night now when I'm able to, and I know for some people, like, there's so many different things at play. Some of us have children, and then we also have health issues. I have a thyroid issue. And so I'm learning that balance of, when I don't get that time that I want, I can push a little bit and I can stay up late. But there are times where I'm like, you know what? It's also like, we're going to be okay. I'm going to go to bed tonight. And in seasons like that, the second thing that I like to say is that contemplation matters. Your contemplation counts. And so certainly what you were just saying, there are times where you might have ideas rolling in your head, and, when am I going to sit down and write this out? When am I going to sit down and paint this? When can I get to a studio and choreograph these dance moves that I see in my head? And that might not always be possible, because of whatever season you're in. Motherhood, it could be a demanding job, it could be your health. But I always tell people, that is an important process, and that whatever is taking place while you're thinking, while you're brainstorming, as ideas are coming to you, as you're maybe just jotting them down, you can't really get to them fully, that matters, and that you are creating. Your brain is like forging a path where you're literally building, like, whatever that is. And so, I mean, I have so many fiction book ideas, so many, and I have Google folders for each of them. And I try to, save things there when I can, but logistically, I can't work on that right now. I don't even, sometimes I don't have time to brush my teeth in the morning. Like, I'm not even kidding. And so, but do I think about it? Oh yeah. Do I, in my heart, know and believe that this time that I'm spending thinking on it matters? Absolutely. As I'm doing research and pressing into the different characters and how I want to develop them. Absolutely. So yeah, those are 2 things that I like to say.
I was going to say, I've heard it said, if you don't, especially in young motherhood, I've heard it said, you're living out the stories you're going to tell later. You're actually, you're not writing, but you're living, and the things that you're doing now are going to be what you write about later. So just really soak up the life that is happening around you, because the more you soak it up, the more it'll come back to you later when you're ready and have the time to write about it. So,
Absolutely.
Okay. So, I also liked a post of yours that said, it was a post about the main text was, let your words be small. And sometimes your words are just for the people that you love, and they're not always for an audience. And I know for me, as a freelance writer, I sometimes, like, everything I write, I'm thinking of it in terms of this huge audience that's going to read it. But there is something lost, I think, when you forget about the small words. And It's like growing up, I'm sure the same. Like I always had a diary. I always had a journal. Throughout college, I wrote stuff all the time. Nobody read any of it, but I just love to write. And I still love to write, but I sort of have lost the magic or the joy that comes with just writing for fun, I guess.
Mhm.
And so talk about that a little bit and why that matters.
Yeah. I can remember those days where, you pull up a journal and you're not thinking about the, 5,000 plus eyes that are going to see that. And I miss those days. I really do. And so, yeah, we are presented with a different time and a different age, which brings us to different choices that we can make. Um, and I don't know, like I don't, I think for so long, I don't journal anymore. I'm not in a journaling season right now. I'll just admit that right now. And I tried so hard to go back to that because I thought like, well, this is how I will preserve the writing that's just for me or the creativity that's just for me. But the truth is I personally have evolved from that. Like I don't want to keep a journal every day anymore. I'd rather write other things and I would rather create other things. And so what I have found in this season is there are things that I create that I don't ever share. There are pictures that I take that I don't share. And for me, that satisfies that almost that like sacred, I don't know, that sacred act of creating where no one else is looking, singing and cooking. Yeah, just like pursuing other things that don't get Instagrammed, that don't get shared. And I think it's important too to remember, like, we don't always have to teach. That's another thing that I post about. We don't always have to teach. Like we can come across a revelation, we can see a sunset, we can see whatever it is that we are seeing in our day, and it doesn't have to become a lesson. It can just become something treasured. So I think it becomes a practice, like a discipline where we learn to not always share those things. But I do think that there's also like opportunity to do other things. It doesn't, we don't always have to pick up a pen. We could do something else. But I guess, for those diehard writers I'm one myself, but for those that really do enjoy maybe journaling or blogging or, Instagramming, if it's, maybe like there's just a way to like evaluate, like, is it the fact that I want to use my phone and not a journal anymore? Okay, so if I prefer to use my phone, maybe I just keep notes in my phone that I don't share. Maybe it's not a matter of, sharing on your Instagram, but it's a matter of just sharing an email with a few select friends instead, and sharing updates from your life and saying, hey, this is what's going on. This is what God is teaching me. This is what I'm seeing in the world. This is how I'm growing. And so I think it changed, there's a shift that happens when you make that shift. I don't necessarily think that it's, always about, well, now I need to step away from social media or I need a social media break. I think we can be more creative in how we address, these desires for pulling back or, does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to ask you about losing your Instagram account because number one, that's how I found you. So many people were so kind, when they were saying, oh, this poor girl, she lost her Instagram account, and go follow her. Because it sounds petty when you just say it out loud, but it's not. It's not as a creator who has been building it up for years. It's not just an Instagram account. It's something you've grown and cultivated and built this community. It's like lots of hard work and time. And so to think you had lost it forever, not the most devastating thing in the world, but pretty tough to swallow. So luckily you did get it back to the end of the story, but just kind of go through that experience and how you dealt with it.
Gosh, well, the ironic thing about all of this is that, so I have a team, my Indelible Ink Writers team, and I'm always coaching them, mentoring them, teaching them things. And so I'm always telling them how to guard their work on Instagram and social media. And so literally all the time, I'm like, did you back up your Instagram? Because you can do that. I'm like, did you back up your Instagram?
I should do that.
You should. You really should. Like, people don't realize that's an actual option. But anyway, so I'm like, I'm always coaching others and whatnot. And the other ironic thing is that I was using my Instagram for other people. Like, it's not a secret, but like my book will be featuring pieces and poems by other people, like a lot of other people. And that was just the desire that I had, is to share the beautiful work that other people are doing alongside of my words. Like, I would feel honored to do that. And so I'm like searching for poems, trying to find ones that I've saved. And like literally in the middle of that, I got locked out of my account. So it's a long story short, but I will say that the two hardest things about that whole saga, as I call it, is that number one, I am actually an introvert. Like, I am the kind of person that does not want attention on them. I would prefer to be behind the scenes and just kind of slip into the background. And so when this happened and everyone was like sharing my account, I was like, this is great. But I was like, wow, I'm like literally the center of attention, and it's kind of awkward and weird. And I love everybody, but can we please just get back to normal life? So that was really like, I feel like heat in my body as I even think about it. It's like just total, like, yeah, not insecure, not shy, but I'm like, I just prefer when we talk about like the mountains.
Something
like
else.
Let's all talk. Yeah. So that was hard. The second hardest thing though, when this was all happening and I shared with my closest friends and my team, I was like, honestly, I'm not worried about the followers. I was like, I know that if like people shared, like I would find either the same people or new people. Like, I did not worry about losing those followers and losing a platform. The hardest thing for me was the time. And I was already so tired. I gave birth this year, or 2021, I gave birth, was writing a book, the pandemic. And then I was also experiencing, like, I'm working through my own health journey right now. My thyroid at that, which it targets your energy and your sleep and all these different things. And so I just, I like told my team and my friends, I was like, I'm so tired. And I didn't anticipate having to build something else right now. So that was the hardest thing. But I did get my account back. It was the most random fluke that, I can't really give details about it, but there was something behind the scenes that happened. And it was like, how did that ever happen? And just so glad that it was able to be recovered. But I think I learned from that, like I said, I'm the kind of person, like I could live off the grid and literally be the happiest person in the world. I really could. I really could. I really, really could. And, once again, that just showed me that, like, what I'm doing, where I'm at, it matters. And it just showed it. And beyond me, even, it showed me the beauty in other people once again. And I just am in awe of that. Like, I could not express anymore how this was not about me. It wasn't about me building back my followers. I just kind of like sat back and I was like, people are good. How could you say that they're not? Like, and this is something so small. I know it's easy to just reshare a post, but I was like, this is beautiful. Like, the confessions, the words that people were sharing. So, yeah, definitely marked by that experience. And I've always fancied writing a book about like social media and communication. And I don't know, we'll see what happens, but yeah.
What would you say your writing process is now, or what is your sort of, I guess, not daily life, but like when you're going to be writing, what do you do? Do you have special coffee mug? Do you have a special place? Do you have rituals?
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Yeah, I will say I'm a big advocate for rituals over routines. Routines are always changing, seasons are always changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that routines are great, but I think it's important to have something to fall back on when those routines change. And that's where rituals come into place. And I think those are like a little bit different, you know? So I like to light candles. That is something that I like to do when I start. I am super weird. I can listen to the same song on repeat for days on end, and it drives my family crazy.
What song?
Oh gosh, they're all so different. The one that I listened to the most while writing my book was Time by Hans Zimmer. And it's from the soundtrack of the movie Inception. And so literally whenever that would play, my son, who's 3 years old, yeah, he would come over and he'd say, "Mommy, it's your song." Like, so they know when they hear that music, it's like a trigger, like, okay, mommy is writing.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, so those are two major things that I always do. And I have a couple different songs, but I always have a set song for, like, for instance, if I've got ideas coming for the fiction book that I'm kind of contemplating and drafting and plotting, I have a specific song that I play to kind of, it helps me see that movie in my head of, you know, what's happening in this book. So I have different songs for different things, for different chapters, even as I worked on this book that will be coming out in October. And then the other thing, I usually drink tea, but I'm backsliding back into my coffee habits, and that's thanks to my husband, who actually works with coffee. He's a roaster.
Oh my gosh!
And so,
yeah, we're
I'm
coffee
so
people.
So everybody,
yeah, we are so coffee people. We like buy really nice coffee because we're so obsessed with it.
Hey, it makes a difference.
Yeah,
it really does make a difference. Like brewing it right, and so always having something, you know, soothing and comfortable. I will say location, that's one of those things where I've become adaptable. I've learned to be able to work really anywhere. So I have my office where I sit.
Oh, that's good.
Sometimes I move my computer into the kitchen while my kids are playing, and then I can do some things, and I stand. Standing is really great. It helps kind of keep you like energized, and you're just alert and awake. I write in the car a lot, different things.
Oh my gosh, how do you do that? I could not do that.
Pandemic, I didn't have a choice. And then I was like, wow, I love this. I don't have to wear headphones. I can blast the music as loud as I want.
That's true.
Yeah, so it's good. So those are a few rituals that I do keep.
Okay. You know, that's kind of I have never really asked people that, and it just kind of popped in my head, and I think I'm going to make it a new question because I think it's interesting. As a writer, I think it's super interesting. Mine is like, well, I almost always do my like bulk writing at a coffee shop. Like that's just sort of my routine. But the problem is that I've got it in my head that like I have to be there to get anything done. And so then that's not good.
Yeah.
And the thing is I know if I just start, you know, it's kind of like that whole, if you just get started, it's fine. But like I'll procrastinate at home and I'll just be like, no, I just can't do it. But it's just all mind. It's a mental game.
It is. It really is. And that's where I think the rituals really help with that. Like once I strike that match, and I love using matches over lighters. I strike that match and the candle's on. It's like, okay, it's time now, you know?
Yeah.
And so those are like little triggers for you for your brain even to think so like, okay, it's time to write.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite candle scent or candle that you buy?
I like anything that is like soy and natural. I will say my favorites are the wood wick candles that sound like fire, crackles burning. Yeah, so any chance I can save up for those because they're pretty expensive. But
I know that's the thing is like candles can be very expensive, but I have gotten, honestly, it was not until the pandemic that I was really into candles. Like I just was never a candle person. And then I don't know what it was. I started doing it and now I'm like obsessed with them and I have them going all the time. So
yes.
I actually wrote a story about the candle industry last year and how they like had soaring sales during the pandemic. So that was kind of a interesting side note. People got into candles.
That is interesting. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So just, we're almost out of time, but I would love to hear, do you have a favorite or a favorite couple of books that you have read for people for writing, on creativity, on writing? I know I just love reading stuff like, Anne Lamott or whatever. So do you have any that you love?
I do. This isn't anybody that anyone will know, but his name is Peter Elbow, and he wrote the book called Writing Without Teachers. I had to read that book in my critical writing theory class in college. I studied creative writing. And it was in that class when I learned the difference between the writing and the editing process. So that book explores that concept. And really, it just, it's not even the most, you might think it's a boring book. Like you just look at it and it's bland. It looks bland, but that was so transformative and foundational in my writing journey, and realizing that the writing process is a separate process from the editing process. The concept of free writing, allowing yourself to write without editing, write without stopping, and how that is so much better for you in terms of brainstorming and getting things out, but then how it allows the editing process to really be as strong as it could and should be. And so I highly recommend that, because I know something that writers say all the time is, oh, I like to edit as I write, or I like to fix things as I write. And I am that person that if I'm typing something on the computer and someone's like looking over my shoulder, they're seeing the little squiggles, they're like, oh, you spelled that word wrong. And I'm like, not going to fix it, not going to fix it. So yeah, I really value those two separate processes. So that's Writing Without Teachers by Peter Elbow. And then I would say Walking on Water by Madeleine L'Engle is definitely, a book that grapples art and faith. And so for anyone that struggles and questions and says like, is what I'm doing okay? Is it right? Is it good? That is a great book to read. And then aside from like writing, well, of course, my book will be coming out as well in October 22. So, keep a lookout for that, because it will be heavily on all different forms of creativity and how we can enter into it and how we actually already are. So that will be coming out later this year. But I also like to I always encourage people to just read in general, and so for instance, one of the people, I hear a lot about my poetry, but there was one particular person on Instagram who was like, I'd be interested in reading some of your prose. And when that person commented, I don't even remember what their name was, but I was like, oh, like that hit me right in my heart, because I actually love prose more than I do poetry, but because of Instagram and, character limits, it makes it difficult. And so I don't do it that much. But one of the people that really has informed and not inspired, but I guess shaped the way that I pay attention to my prose and craft them is Joan Didion. And she just passed away, and one of my favorite writers. Her prose are gorgeous. And how can you read one of her books and not notice her prose and not think to yourself, my goodness, how do I learn how to do that? Right. And so I think just reading good books too will, like, you will pick it up. You will become you will study the words of that person that you're writing. And that's how we learn, these authors end up mentoring us without them even knowing. And so, yeah, just read.
How much fiction versus nonfiction do you read?
Gosh, yeah, that is, I'm not gonna lie, like I'm not reading anything right now. I'm not. And I admitted that on the last podcast interview that I had right before December, when I went into crunch mode with my book. Yeah, I definitely read more nonfiction than fiction. And that's because I am in a place where I'm working on nonfiction books. And so I feel like I have to, I read them to study them.
That is my life. I'm just like constantly reading just for learning.
Yeah. To like, format and how they're organized and whatnot. And so that's kind of the season that I'm in. My heart wants to read more fiction, and I think I'll be there soon. But yeah, when I'm focused and committed, I kind of go all in. And so, yeah, not so much fiction. I've been listening to an audiobook. I don't know how to say the author's name, but it's The Firekeeper's Daughter.
Okay.
And so it's written by a Native American author. And that's been a goal of mine, is to kind of branch out and try books by names that you don't really hear very often. So yeah, that's a tender question for me, because I want to be all in the fiction right now.
I haven't read a fiction book in like a year, and it's been weighing on me, because I do enjoy a good fiction book. Yet my whole stack is just nonfiction, partly because I'm just sort of in this writing world, and I actually just know people that are writing books, and there's so many subjects that I'm like, that's so interesting. I want to learn about that. But I also know that reading fiction is a great creative exercise. It's a different kind of writing. And so it gets your brain moving in different ways that you wouldn't reading nonfiction. And so I'm really feeling that urge. I'm like, I've got to track down a good fiction book right now.
Yeah. Well, and going back to what we were saying before, when it comes to like when you're writing and you end up just writing for other people, I think I could say that's the case with my reading life. Like I'm looking at a stack of books right now that I have to read because I'm an evaluator for them. So like reading is my job now. It's not like I have a choice, but I don't have much choice. And again, you have author friends that send you books. And so it becomes this necessity, and fiction really can be that escape, that thing that we can do to enjoy ourselves, and to really slip away. And I actually wrote about that in my book. I have a whole chapter that is on fiction and story.
So fun.
Yeah, and the importance of it. And so I actually write.
Now I have another book that I'm going to be
just
adding to the stack. No, but I'll be excited. That sounds awesome. I just, I don't think there are a ton of books out there that are so focused on the creativity side, and especially, the intersection of faith. That is huge. That is definitely like a sweet spot for me. So I'm excited about your book and your writing. I love all of the stuff that you're putting out there. And I just thank you for your time for this interview. And I'm glad you got your Instagram account back.
Thanks.
You're welcome. But yeah, thank you so much, Rachel.
No, thanks for having me. And it's such a pleasure to meet you and get to know you.
All right. Okay, we're good.